introduce Mayor Maddie Brown.
Thank you, Chad. I just want to start out by thanking everyone for coming here tonight. This is probably the biggest group I've ever spoken in front of in my life. So I'm a little nervous, so bear with me. But we'll have some fun tonight. There'll be a lot of information. Just soak it in. You'll have a lot of time to digest it over the next 3 months, so have some fun. We will definitely be putting this information online as well. So the slideshow will be online. We're going to videotape the meeting. It's going to be online as well, so you'll have a lot of opportunity to look back over the information. I want to give a couple thank yous really quick. Chad Sweet, thank you for putting this slideshow together. Mike Lloyd. Mike Lloyd is going to be filming tonight, and the video is going to be available online probably by Thursday, so Thursday-ish. So we'll let you know. We'll put a blog post out. Anyone that's not here in attendance, if you know of anybody, you can send a link to them as well so they can view it. I want to give a thank you to Candace Smith from the Gearhart Homeowners Association. She helped us with some landscaping drawings that we'll show you later on. And a very special thank you to BB Michelle and Jeannie Mark for going door to door to get the word out to our citizens and residents about tonight's meeting. So Resilient Together, talking about a new Gearhart emergency response and resilience station. And to start things off, we want to talk a little bit about what we're trying to accomplish. And our goal is to get public support for a final location. It is very important that we provide transparency to you, obtain your trust, educate our citizens, and get our citizens invested in this needed project. We want to build a partnership with you. We want to collaborate with you. Our goals are to listen, to follow up, to follow through, and to be forthright. Remember that consensus is very difficult. How much can we expect? Well, we will keep you informed. We will listen to your concerns. We will work with you to ensure your concerns are considered in the decisions that are made. We will look to you for advice and innovation and incorporate this in the decisions as much as possible. We plan to implement what the majority decides. Regardless of all of our viewpoints, please remember what we share in common. We all love Gearhart. Thanks to you all, it's been an incredible last few years in Gearhart. Together, in 2017, we voted to ensure Gearhart remains the quiet residential community we all know and love. Last year, we made sure that scotch broom and other noxious weeds no longer take over our precious and natural dune and park areas. And finally, we all came together and celebrated 100 years of our amazing community. Let's take the next steps to ensure Gearhart is sustainable and resilient for the next 100 years. And let's start that process tonight. Okay, did everyone get an agenda for tonight, most of you? Great, so we've got some awesome guest speakers here tonight. Each person's gonna do a little slideshow presentation to get you as much of the updated information as possible. Once our speakers are done, we're gonna introduce 3 concepts for a new station at 3 different locations. After that, we're going to do a public feedback and question session. Okay, so anybody that wants to speak tonight on the record, either their comments or ask any questions from our panel here, please make sure that you sign up with Christy. Christy's got a sign-up sheet, and then each person that wants to speak is going to get a couple minutes, and we're going to call them up to the podium one at a time, and then they can get on the public record. For those of you that might get a little nervous speaking publicly or don't want to be on the record, we're going to have an informal meet and greet after the meeting. So if you have any questions, make sure you jot them down. Our panel's going to be here after the presentation to just talk with you if you're confused about something or you need clarification on something. They're going to be here for you to answer any questions that you need in an informal setting, okay? And that's the agenda for tonight. A couple things to remember, and I want to be very clear on this. No decisions have been made yet on any location for a new station. No official votes have been taken. Tonight, this is an informal meeting only, an informational meeting only. We want to update the public on the latest information. No decisions will be made tonight. No decisions. This is just an informational meeting. The public will be involved in the process of choosing a new station location and concept. Ultimately, any decision made will have to go to a public vote of the Gearhart citizens. So remember that. We don't want to support a location that's not going to pass on a ballot. So we want to make sure that whatever location gets chosen is one that has a chance to pass from the general public. We want to encourage open, honest, and constructive dialogue and feedback. We need all of you to help get the latest and correct information to all of our residents and citizens, so they can give feedback based on the latest facts and science. Just want to be clear, you're going to see a lot of misinformation out there. Some information on Facebook, people handing out packets. I want to make sure that you all get the correct information from the city so that you can make the best informed decision that's best for the community. And one last thing, we're all in this together. I want to start out by thanking our Gearhart Volunteer Fire Department. First of all, Chief Bill Eddy has spent 34 years as a Gearhart firefighter. Lieutenant and Training Officer Josh Como, who helps with a lot of the training of our volunteers. And we're so lucky to have 37 professionally trained volunteers and their families. Thank you for protecting our community. We are very lucky to have you. I want to also give, obviously, a big thank you to our Fire Station Committee. Our Fire Station Committee is made up of Gearhart citizens and residents within our Gearhart Fire District. Originally appointed by Mayor Witta and the City Council, former Councilor Sue Lorraine served as our council liaison. Thank you, Sue, for all of your service. And Jay Speakman is now our committee chairman. The committee has worked diligently for over 3 years and was tasked with doing research and exploring ideas for 9 possible locations. Working with experts and lots of deliberation has narrowed the locations down to 3 concepts that they recommend we present to you tonight. Also, thank you to our experts and state agencies who have also assisted our committee. Geologist Tom Horning, architect Vars Lasdens, the Oregon Department of Land Conservation and Development, which is DLCD, you're going to hear that a little bit tonight, DLCD, and also the Oregon Department of Geology and Mineral Industries, which is called DUGAMI. DUGAMI is the organization that makes some of those evacuation maps that you hopefully have, and we're handing out tonight as well. Very important to know that the Gearhart City Council identified building a new station as a top priority. So I'm going to name our fire committee members really quickly. Sue Lorraine, Carolyn Anderson, Gary Gillum, Grace Bruseth, Jay Speakman, Jeannie Mark, John Baum, Lori Lum, Marilyn Gilbaugh, Tom Tees, and Will LaRue. Thank you very much for all your work. So where are we now? Well, we're still very early in a 3-phase process. Phase 1 was the committee has done extensive research and worked with local experts on 9 possible locations and has, like I said before, narrowed it down to 3 concepts to present to you tonight. They used a station location decision matrix to come up with a scoring system to rank each station. That decision matrix will also be available online for you guys to view. Phase 2 starts now, so we're just at the beginning of Phase 2. Phase 2 is presenting 3 concepts to the public and beginning a 3-month feedback and listening period to determine public opinion. Each resident of Gearhart will have a chance to fill out a questionnaire and rank each location and give other pertinent feedback. This is the copy of the questionnaire that everyone will get tonight at the end of the meeting. It'll also be available online for those that aren't at the meeting. And it's very important that we try to get, my goal would be to try to get every resident of Gearhart, every citizen, every resident to fill one of these out. At the end of the 3 months, the committee and city staff will tabulate the results of the questionnaire into a report for the city council that'll also be available to the public. The city council may then choose to vote on one of those locations to put on a bond for a future ballot. Or we may not have enough information, and so we might want to request more information from our citizens. Or we may choose to do nothing. Maybe there's not enough support for a new fire station and we have to start over. But hopefully not. So we're just beginning Phase 2 right now. Phase 3, if the public was behind a location and the city council decided to put that location on a ballot, then a bond to build a new station could go on a future ballot to be voted on by the citizens of Gearhart. So, for instance, a bond decision deadline of this August could put a bond on the ballot for November of 2019. So just want to be real clear too, no matter what happens, this has to go to a vote of the people. To build a new fire station in Gearhart, it has to go to a vote of the people. So I want to make sure everybody's clear on that. It's you that ultimately decides if we're going to have a new fire station or not. Let's start Phase 2. So we're going to kick off a 3-month feedback and listening period to answer 3 simple questions. Number 1, does the public support a new station? We got to have public support for a new station. So we got to find out if the public supports one. Number 2, what concept and location does the public support? Like I said earlier, it wouldn't make sense to put it on a ballot for a public vote if the public didn't support the location. Third question we need to answer is, how does the public want to fund the new station? How do we want to pay for it? Do we want to do a bond? Do we want to try to get private financing? We have to find out how to pay for it before we put it to a vote, because we want to make sure that the public supports that funding. So thank you all for coming. Next up, we have Chief Bill Eddy. Chief Bill Eddy, like I said, 34 years in the Gearhart Fire Department. He's going to talk a little bit about why we need a new emergency response and resiliency station, and I'd like to introduce Chief Bill Eddy.
Thanks, Mayor.
You good on everything?
I think so. I think you're bad at public speaking. Wait till me. Okay. First off, I mean, new station. You know, you could look around and make your own decision on the station right now. It is old. It was built in 1958 by volunteers, hollow block. One thing you don't see, because these walls are covered with about 4 to 6 inches insulation, are the cracks that are in the walls. There's one crack directly behind here that goes all the way from the ceiling almost down to the floor. That's what separates the water shop in here, and it's about, what, quarter to half inch thick in some places. The building's just getting old. It's getting old, getting tired. It doesn't meet the needs of the fire service nowadays. So there's a lot of things, you know, that I can talk on and on about how bad this building is, but the main thing is the 36, 37 men and women we have volunteering for this department. For them to come down here all the time, well, at least once a week, and then on calls and to serve the community. They need a location where it's easy for them to train. It's someplace that they're proud of, someplace that they can go and feel a part of. And plain and simple anymore, it's almost impossible to train these people in this building. On Wednesday nights, if it's not council meeting nights, we're over in City Hall. We have some people out at the substation, and we have people in the water shop training, because we have such a variety of people joining the department in different stages of training. So it's getting almost impossible to train these people. And that's the biggest asset that the city has. I don't care if you park here, High Point, or wherever, those are pieces of sand. You know, those people are the ones you can't replace. Sand you can replace any day. You know, those are the people you have to be thinking about. So that is my main thing on the fire station when it needs to be replaced. Not only the building's not going to survive, it's for those people who volunteer to serve you day in and day out, 24/7. So, get on here. Last year, you know, those are the response times and everything else. Between 2018, 13,906 hours of both training and response is what the volunteers gave the city of Gearhart. And to put it in dollar volume wise, if they were paid personnel, that would end up being, see if I can find it, $494,358.30. That's what they saved the city of Gearhart in 2018. And they're too proud of it. And everybody's, you know, there was one comment I heard that they're just volunteers. I hate to say it, but those people out there that volunteer for this city, a certification they have as NFPA Firefighter 1 or as an EMT licensed, either intermediate, paramedic, or basic in the state of Oregon, are the exact same licenses and certifications somebody from Portland Fire or Tualatin Valley Fire have. There's no difference in the training. The level is the same. So it just goes to show the kind of commitment that these people have to you in the community. So, go ahead, Chad. As far as, if you take a look, in the last 10 years, we have had, well, since we started, I think this is from when I took over as far as electronic records, shows you what our call volume is. Our call volume in the last 10 years has increased by 48%. That's something that's going to continue to increase all the time. Tell me why, I'm not really sure, but every department in this county has that specific problem right now. They're looking at high double-digit increases per year. And it's not going to slow down. You can see sometimes there's dips and it levels off, but if you take a graph across that from, I think it was the year 2000 that we started at, it's a steady incline, and it'll continue to be that way too. And so without volunteers, without some place for them to respond out of, you know, who's going to do those services for you in the next 20, 15, 30, 40 years? You know, you have to provide for them. So. Okay, or Tom Horning. Okay, well, why don't you wait just a second? I've got a couple other things I wouldn't mind bringing up, if that's okay. Real quick. As far as the new station, there's a lot of things that can be used for, and not only just the fire station, but a place that the community can be proud of, where they can go, they can have public meetings. They're not stuck in this little room. I'm not saying it have that many big rooms, but some place where you can, you have the CERT team that's around here, you have other groups that want to meet and everything else. It gives them a place to go. And it's also a place, if we do have a natural disaster, that could provide shelter, be an EOC, which is an emergency operations center, that you know, we could actually work out of. So that's pretty much it. Okay.
Thanks, Chief.
Mayor.
Thank you, Chief Bill Eddy. I thought you did fine, Bill.
I'm still shaking.
Okay, gives me great pleasure to announce our next speaker. Tom Horning is a geologist. He's also a city councilor in Seaside. He's one of the foremost local experts on the threat of a Cascadia earthquake and tsunami. He's also one of the smartest people I have ever met, and that includes everyone in this room. No, just kidding. But he's one of the smartest people that I've ever met. He's also one of the coolest people that I've ever met. So if you ever go and have a coffee at Pacific Way in the mornings, you might see him there. But I do want to introduce Tom Horning.
Hard to be modest after that. All right, Chad, do you want to?
I do want
There you go.
to. And we did.
Okay, I thought I'd take you through a scenario of an earthquake and tsunami. I'm using pictures from around the world and locally to do this, and then we'll go into delve into some of the statistics. So this is Sendai in the Tohoku earthquake area of 2011 in Japan. Next. When the earthquake struck, it came without warning, although there had been a precursor quake about 2 weeks before, but no one knows a precursor until the big one hits. So it's one of those dirty little secrets that everybody knows about. But the first thing that happened is the land lurched something on the order of 40 feet to the south, to the east, and it dropped as much as 4 or 5 feet along the northwest shore, coast of Japan. We'll have the same sort of event here. Our earthquake will strike without warning. Next. Old houses will be broken up if they don't have good foundations. Examples here are one house that had brick and mortar foundation, unreinforced masonry. This is another one. These kind of buildings do very poorly in earthquakes. Storefronts in Northern California are like that. And houses here in Gearhart, I'm sure, would look just like this. Next. And then the unreinforced masonry construction of the fire station, it makes this place a collapser. They won't stand more than 20 seconds probably. The earthquake will shake from 3 to 5 minutes and rather violently. Next. Landslides will break up roads. The highways will be blocked. You won't be able to get to Portland. You won't be able to get to Astoria. Next. Some of these landslides will be fairly large. It turns out the Coast Range is filled with inactive landslides, gigantic ones, miles across. And we've often debated about this over the years, but now everyone's converging on the idea that, well, it looks like these earthquakes knock the hills loose, and they do move quite a bit. So this is likely what we might see next. Liquefaction can take place where the water table is near the surface and you have weak unconsolidated material. During the shaking, the particles collapse, they expel water, and it turns into quicksand and things flow sideways. Next. You can expect that near Neocoxy Creek, but not necessarily up in the dunes. Poorly built bridges shake apart. Good example. This was knocked down by an earthquake. Next. Although good bridges, strong concrete, good foundations, good design, they can handle earthquakes and tsunamis. This is from Banda Aceh. Next. In this particular case, in New Zealand, the approach to the bridge settled and dropped about 2.5 feet. This might happen here in the coast for some of the older bridges, making it difficult if you thought you could travel over the bridge in your car to evacuate. You're likely going to have to give it up and climb over this and walk. This is an expected problem. It can be designed for with new bridges. Or bridges or roads can break up. Who knows what caused this part of the road to break up, but it makes you kind of wonder what's about to happen. Had to throw that in. Next. And then lastly, fires will break out. Natural gas pipes will break and ignite fires, and it'll be like San Francisco in 1906 perhaps. It all depends on whether you can put the fires out, and that's one of those reasons why you want to have a fire station. Next. There'll be aftershocks. The big earthquake occurred on March 11th. The fourth shock occurred before. This is a time scale showing all the zillions of aftershocks that shook northern Japan for weeks and then months. Next. Next. So this is an old cartoon that I had sketched that's changed a little bit, so don't tie yourself down to these numbers too closely, but basically this is a time graph going from left to right out to about 2 hours, and vertically is the tsunami inundation. The thing to focus on this is that the land will drop and in about 20 minutes, the tsunami will come on shore. And so you've got a period of about 15 minutes where you can be near rivers and start working your way to safety. But you have to be there within 20 minutes. One of the things to expect is that initially there won't be much water coming in, but the leading edge of the tsunami will arrive before its crest. So it'll be water sliding up the beach, water starting to flow up the rivers, and then eventually the rivers will be flowing up rapidly, looking like rapids in reverse, until about that time the tsunami's crest starts coming over the prom and seaside and up through from the bay into Gearhart. Next. And I show this again because this particular feature over near the Sendai airport shows the tsunami flowing into a river crossing over land about half a mile wide. Next. This shows the crest of the tsunami coming in Sumatra, and these people not quite figuring it out, but starting to. The water had pulled out before the wave came in, but the leading edge is out this dark blue, and a lot of the other photos that show this, you see about a 3 or 2 foot bore of water coming in. That's the leading edge, and this is often observed when tsunamis arrive. Next. In some places, the waves were pretty obvious. In other places, the water just gently flowed up into the neighborhood. This is in Phuket, Thailand, where the leading edge of the wave wasn't preceded by a downdraw. It wasn't pulling out first and then coming in. So this slid up and chased people out, and then the crest arrived. And for those that didn't figure it out, it was too late. Next. Examples of waves. These are pretty exotic, dramatic photos showing waves coming in. This is along the Sendai Plain in Japan, and it shows waves that were approximately 30 to 35 feet high coming on shore. In this case, it flowed through trees that were planted along the shore to help break down tsunami waves when they came in, but they were inadequate. This is pretty amazing. But a lot of it was just gentle flowing water that just kept getting higher and higher through time. Next. And I show this in Seaside. Remember that photo of the Sendai airport with that big surge of water going into the river? This channel right here in Seaside, we call it the 3rd Avenue Coulee, is a channelway that was cut by tsunami water. It was the direction of the water was to the right into the northeast. Closer views in the next picture. There you go. The channel to nowhere. This actually was fed by water coming in through over here, through where the convention center is, and focusing through there. It's very unusual. It was able to be eroded because these are soft, weak sediments. It stopped at this point because this is where the round rock of Seaside is present. These are old shoreline gravels and boulders. They just don't move in tsunami waters like the other materials. Next. These are pictures to show what will happen, what the place will look like when it's all done. There will be certain areas that are swept clean. It's expected that 92% of Seaside will lose its houses, and something where between 40 and 80% of Gearhart will lose its houses. Next. In some places, if waves get over the dunes, they may pour down. As you can see here, this has all been stripped of vegetation by tsunami currents, and the water got high enough to come over this pass right through here and spilled down. If that happens in Gearhart, it'll cut a fairly quick gap. I've looked at aerial photos and LiDAR images for most of Clatsop Plains looking for gaps like these. I've never seen any. The dunes of Clatsop Plains are 4,000 years old, so we can say in 4,000 years, tsunamis haven't made it over the dunes like the worst case scenario might predict. So it tells you that the worst case scenario is very rare and hasn't happened in the history of Clatsop Plains for the last 4,500 years. Next. Some of the places, driftwood logs, houses moved aside, and sand layers deposited by the tsunamis. This is from 1964, across from my driveway in Seaside. Next. So, are the next quake and tsunami imminent? Can you afford to be wrong? Well, it's Good question. That's for you to think about. How high will the tsunami flood? Go ahead. Notice here we are. Here's Gearhart. Here's the continental shelf. And as you go down into deeper water, the colors get darker. And you'll notice there's a series of ridges and hills going down here. It'd be basically like driving over to Portland. You drive about the same distance to get to the bottom. You'd be going over a valley and ridge kind of environment. Next, those ridges are there because there are faults poking up from the subduction zone and lifting the land. These are called splay faults, and when these splay faults pick up a lot of the deformation of the subduction zone, when an earthquake takes place, it lifts the land preferentially in a narrow ridge, and this concentrates the seismic energy and makes higher ridges of water, which make higher tsunamis. So the state did a series of studies and made assumptions about how much this was lifting, and they came up with the more likely scenarios are that we will be having one of these splay fault earthquakes, and so they ultimately came up with a series of earthquakes of variable size and tsunamis that would be generated from them, and they broke them out into a series of sizes that are just like t-shirts: small, medium, and large, and extra large, and extra extra large. What's the most probable one? Next one, please. Here's what the splay faults look like in a cartoon. Continental shelf, continental slope, and the subduction zone is going down through here, but the displacement is taking place along these splays here. Next. You can see them down here off the shelf. Seaside's over here, Tillamook's down here, and here's the seafloor. Well, it's all broken up with these splays lifting. So these things will rise, and that will cause the next earthquake, or the next tsunami. Next. So we're here in Gearhart now. They created run-up maps assuming various sized waves using the small, medium, large scenario, large, extra large, and the extra, extra large is so insignificant it doesn't even show up on this map. It's just like a foot higher. The most likely scenario is the larger size of medium to the medium size of large. And so, next picture. Oh boy, we should probably not go through this, but there's too many tables. These boxes say these are the big numbers, shoot for a large. This is called the L1 scenario. It's fairly abundant. It's about 1/3 as abundant as these smaller ones, but it's significant enough that rather than worry about Gearhart being totally overwhelmed by water from an extra, extra large, assume that you're dealing with an L1. Gives you room to maneuver, and it's probably more likely that you won't have a wave much larger. Go ahead. Kurt Peterson also did some studies. He didn't do modeling. He went out and said, well, modeling is one thing, but seeing it with your eyes is another. So he looked at sand deposits that were washed in across the coastal plain and determined how far the sand went in and how far upslope the land was, and could determine how high the wave was in order to carry that sand in, and then determine what was the actual wave elevation at the beach. And he found out that for Cannon Beach and then down at Moores, down by Beaver, Central Oregon coast, these two areas have these large earthquakes or large tsunamis with 15 meters of run-up, which is roughly about 50 feet. There's also an equal number of them that are smaller, about 25 feet, maybe 30 feet. So you got this range, but since they're about equal in abundance, why don't you assume that the worst case is likely to be a 50-foot tsunami? And that converges pretty well with what the state determined from their models. So we've got it from both modeling and field evidence that you can expect maybe as much as a 50-foot tsunami. And that's important because the L1 scenario flood maps, which we're about to see, show you where the water will flood under those conditions. Go ahead. Okay, well, let's see, cross sections. This shows waves cycles from the beginning of time out here to about 8 hours. And the highest wave is to 70 feet. That's for the extra, extra large, highly improbable, and you're never going to see it in a million years tsunami. The more likely is the L1, which ranges as high as 50 and as low as 36. This is what you're probably going to get. Go ahead. This is a profile going across Gin Ridge and across the Neocoxy all the way over to the base of the hills, and it shows waves of different size: small, medium, large, extra large, and extra, extra large. Notice that the large, or the extra large, does not get over the dune. It gets up on it, but it doesn't get over it. You're likely going to see water right about this elevation, where the mustard yellow turns into orange yellow. Go ahead. That's about a 45-foot tsunami. So here's the L1 scenario flood map. We're right here, City Hall, and this is the park. This is High Point. Let's see, excuse me, here's High Point right here. Here's Gun Club Road. And all this area is expected to go underwater, and these colors correlate to the depth of water. So up here at the park, it shows water between 0 and 10 feet deep. And down in this area, I'm going to 20 to 30 feet of water over the land. Go ahead. This is slightly blown up and zoomed in so you can see where the park is, where High Point is, and several other sites which are deeply in the tsunami run-up zone and are too dangerous to site a fire station. The colors are coded up here if you can read those numbers.
So what is the gray?
Gray is unflooded. This is dry land. So you have places to go. Up at the condos, it's high enough even for the worst case, the high side, the 60-foot tsunami. It's more likely a 50-foot tsunami. So this actually paints a whole lot of Gearhart's west side as inundated when it actually probably wouldn't be if it were a 50-foot wave. Go ahead. So here's the city of Gearhart has so many houses, 1,729 buildings. Under a large scenario tsunami, 1,486 would be flooded and likely destroyed. That's 81% of the houses of Gearhart will be destroyed. The good news is you can get out of the way before the wave gets here. Next. So here we are back to the station. For your reference, this blue dashed line up here shows where the water elevation would be for the 50-foot tsunami. So, you know, even if you replace this station with a fine new building, it'll fill up with water and your trucks won't work and the houses will burn and they won't be able to put them out. This box has scores. We set a matrix and looked at about 9 different locations around the city. Some had liquefaction problems, some had tsunami inundation problems, others had weak fill. And we scored them as well as we could. And the best we came up with were High Point in the park and a couple of joint places out on Delray Beach Road, fairly distant. There's also the possibility of going up on the hill if you can figure out how to get through the water after the tsunami, because it's expected that the tsunami will flood the backside of Gearhart with a permanent pond of water, probably 5 feet deep or so. You wouldn't be able to get through it very well with a truck. Go ahead. So here's the High Point, here's the park. If you went down Pacific Way and across the marsh to this hill, it's got some nice characteristics. It wasn't part of the scenario modeling. We did up here at the water tank choose a site. It measures up pretty well, except there's a problem. There's landslides here. This dark dashed line shows broken up ground where the land has moved in the past. The tank is sited okay, but if you tried to build out here, you'd have problems. So access is one of the major problems here. Next. This document was being circulated on the internet, and I thought I pointed out that this is how high was the wave on the shoreline of Tohoku in the northeast Japan. It has various boxes of information here that are graphed on these scales over here. The area near Sendai, where you have beaches very similar to Gearhart and Clatsop Plains, is box D, and this shows where the 50-foot tsunami would be if we could send it over to Japan. And you can see that most of the wave in this part of the Sendai Plains produced tsunamis below the elevation that we're modeling to strike Gearhart. So it got miscommunicated that perhaps, I think this level was plotted on one of these other graphs. When you get up farther north where get away from the plains and you get into a bunch of incised canyon land that opens right out into the ocean, the waves came in and they funneled up and they got up to they filled the valley up to an elevation of 125 feet. That won't happen here. That process doesn't happen on open plains. Next. So this sums it up. It's pronounced sushi, not tsunami. So don't run for the hills, flailing your arms. There's still room to maneuver. Thank you very much.
Thanks for all the good news, Tom. No, Tom, thank you. We really appreciate it. It's definitely something that is on a lot of people's minds, and we're going to learn some more information about how we can survive the most likely tsunami event. Next up, I'd like to introduce Meg Reed. Meg Reed is from DLCD. Does everyone remember what DLCD stands for? There's a quiz later. Meg is going to talk about what is the current culture of emergency preparedness in not only Clatsop County, but the entire state of Oregon. So please welcome Meg Reed.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So yes, I'm Meg Reed. I am the Coastal Shores Specialist for the Department of Land Conservation and Development, as you just learned, DLCD. I'm based in Newport in their field office there, and I work on coastal hazards with Oregon's coastal communities up and down the coast, cities and counties, on all sorts of coastal hazards, but a lot of my time lately has been on the tsunami, Cascadia subduction zone, earthquake, and tsunami. And so I'm just kind of going to give sort of a bigger picture tonight, just in a couple of slides, about what we're doing across Oregon's coast to prepare for this tsunami and become tsunami resilient, and sort of give some context to this conversation of where to site a fire station in the city of Gearhart. So next, please. So Tom already gave you some really great information, so I'm not going to repeat too much of what he said, but this, just to give you the context, this is our Cascadia subduction zone fault, 600 miles from Cape Mendocino all the way up through Vancouver Island. Next one. And so the problem is that we actually didn't really know about our Cascadia subduction zone for a really long time. We discovered it because after a while, and we didn't really think that it produced earthquakes, but then more digging into it showed that it did actually in fact produce earthquakes, really big earthquakes, but it was really quiet. It doesn't produce them very often. So here on the Oregon coast, we actually don't have a lot of land that's readily accessible to develop, right, except for the ones that's right next to the ocean. That's where flat land is, because otherwise we have the coast hills right behind us, and that's really challenging to develop for other reasons, like landslides and things like that. So next one. So we have over 100 years worth of development that's happened in the coastal plain, and that happens to be in the tsunami hazard zone. So this is probably a pretty familiar picture to many of you. This is the city of Seaside, and this was an aerial photo taken during the beach volleyball contest, where thousands and thousands of extra people come to the Oregon coast. And this is a similar situation, 4th of July weekend, and the Hood to Coast relay race, just a busy summer weekend on the Oregon coast, and not just in Gearhart, but all up and down our Oregon coast. So we definitely want to be thinking about not just people who live here all the time, but also our residents and our visitors who come here. What happens if this Cascadia event happened during that time? And in Seaside in particular, and here in Gearhart is a somewhat similar situation, where you have to really know where to go to get to high ground before the first tsunami wave arrives. So you really need to know your evacuation route really well, because it might not be super intuitive. In the case of Seaside, they have 2 north-south rivers that are going through the community, and that means you have to cross bridges, and not all of them have been seismically retrofitted to withstand an earthquake, but some of them have. So you really need to know which way to go. So we've been working with our partners at the Department of Geology and Mineral Industries to do some detailed evacuation modeling that we call Beat the Wave, and it already exists for Gearhart. I won't really go too much much into detail on that now, but I'm happy to share those resources with you. But it's a pedestrian evacuation exercise that tells us how fast you have to move and which direction to get to high ground before the first tsunami wave arrives. So that's one of the things that we've been producing for our communities up and down the coast. So next one. So I just wanted to kind of give you some examples of what our role is. So we're a state agency, but we're really focused on life safety first. So really, how can we make sure that people can evacuate successfully and get to high ground? So that's really what our role is at the state level, is we're kind of consultants for our local governments to help them with this natural hazard data. Next slide. So we have to be able to do that with some money, right? It's really helpful to have some money with you when you do this kind of planning. So we actually have, we were fortunate in getting 2 grants from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. They gave us 2 competitive grants, next to work with many coastal communities up and down the coast on this tsunami resilience land use planning project that we started in August of 2017. And you can see that Gearhart is one of those cities that's listed as our participating partners. And so we are working with these coastal cities that you see listed, as well as Dogami, to do that beat the wave modeling and then also to update land use regulations. So we are working on that now with the Planning Commission and Gearhart, and it is kind of nice timing to be happening at the same time as this decision for where to put the fire station. So next slide, please. So I'll go through just some resources. Some of them may be repetitive to you, but I just want to make sure that you know of the resources that are out there at your fingertips right now. So first one, this one might seem really familiar to you. I hope it does. This is the tsunami evacuation brochure for the city of Gearhart. And this, again, was produced by Dogami. And you can see here, let's use this pointer, these hatch marks. So this is what Tom was talking about with the large scenario. That's the most likely worst case scenario, and that's 95% of the probability of our next event is encompassed in that large scenario. So this area here that's in the hatched green marks, that is out of the large scenario, whereas the other green that doesn't have hatching through it is outside of the extra large scenario. So I just want to emphasize that we're really focusing on the areas that's above the large event because that is what's more likely to happen. So this is a really great resource to have if you don't already have it. Next slide, please. Oh goodness. The next one. Yeah.
A little bit of Jimmy rigging going on here.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so this also exists online, and if you've never been to OregonTsunami.org before, I'd greatly encourage you to go check it out. This is where it's a state's clearinghouse for tsunami information. And so this is called our evacuation viewer online, and so it's the same information as what's in those printed evacuation brochures, but it's customizable. So if you don't see your favorite beaches on there, or where you live, or where you work, or wherever, is not on that print, already printed brochure, you can actually put in your address in this little box, and then it will take you directly to the area you want to see. And then I didn't have it on this screenshot, but over in the corner there's a custom brochure option, and so you can click on that, and actually you can print your own 8.5 by 11 brochure for any area, however zoomed in or out that you want to be. So that's a really good resource if you haven't checked that out yet. Next slide. And this one is hot off the presses. We actually have a brand new tsunami map app for your phone that you can download now, both on Android and iPhone. It just came out this week. It's called NVS Tsunami Evacuation, but if you just type in tsunami evacuation in your Google Play Store or wherever you get your apps, it should come up. And so this, it pins your location, and so you can have this information at your fingertips wherever you go. Because again, you might not be at home when the next event happens. You could be out somewhere else. So this is really important to know where you are and have situational awareness wherever you are. Next slide. This one Tom showed many times, and I'm glad he did, because this is a really technical product and it has a lot of information on it and can be kind of confusing. But the important thing about the tsunami inundation maps that show those small through extra large scenarios is it helps communities and elected officials and people who are making decisions to think about acceptable level of risk. This is a really important concept, especially when you're thinking about the location for a new fire station or different types of buildings. You know, Seaside just moved their school up to high ground, things like that. This is, what do you think is acceptable for your community? So next slide. This is, again, what really helps you. So like we were saying, the large scenario is the most likely scenario, worst case. So that might be the planning point for decision makers to plan to, versus other types of versus the extra large or extra large. So that's just something to keep in mind, is those small through extra large maps. And then this is something just to kind of talk through local data and how to help inform local decision making. You don't have to get too worried about the details of this map, but just to say that we're here as a resource. This is something our department just generated to show the difference between the large scenario, which is in the gray, the tan box, the tan color, and then and this is just tax lots for the city. And then the red line is the actual current tsunami regulatory line. So this is something that already is in place, it's already law, and it's something that guides decision making for schools, fire stations, police stations, critical and essential facilities, basically. And so this is something that already exists and has to be taken into account when making decision making. So I just wanted to show the difference between those. Next slide. And that can be prohibiting certain new and essential critical facilities from being built, say, for example, a school. And then for new development that does get put in there, they would, like dense developments, like 50 or more subdivision units or hotels and motels, they would have to have evacuation measures incorporated into their development design as part of their development permit. So those are some of the things that we're talking about when we talk about this tsunami hazard overlay zone. And next slide. And so Coos County, Reedsport, Florence, and North Bend have all adopted these into their local comprehensive plans. They're officially part of their plans now. Gearhart is considering it now, and that will, have a public process. And many of other communities are doing this as well. And then the other big thing that we're doing is tsunami evacuation facilities improvement plans, which is kind of a mouthful, but it really is talking about looking at a community's evacuation routes as they exist and as they are needed, looking at vulnerabilities, and then identifying projects to help to improve evacuation. So I just wanted to kind of give a brief overview of things that are happening up and down the coast and how they might be useful here and the information that you can turn to. And that's my contact information if you want to get in touch with me. But again, like I said, I really recommend OregonTsunami.org as a resource, because individuals need to be prepared as well as communities have to be prepared. So we're kind of thinking about it in all those different levels. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Wow, thank you, Meg. That was really, really good stuff. Does anybody want to stand up and stretch? Let's everybody stretch.